The galaxy is a chorus of a trillion voices, a tapestry of light and life woven across the impossible black. Each thread, a civilization. Each knot, a world. For the Galactic Concord, this chorus was a symphony of order, a melody played on instruments of hyper-advanced physics, quantum engineering, and psionic harmony. They were the composers of reality, bending space and thought to their will. And then there was Earth. To the Concord, humanity was not a thread, but a frayed, chaotic, and cacophonous knot. We were the species that, upon being discovered, had not yet even unified our own planet. We bickered over borders drawn on maps, over resources we had barely tapped, over gods whose names we couldn't agree on. We were a cacophony of 1,000 different cultures, a billion conflicting dreams. Our technology? It was a museum of the absurd. We used controlled explosions for propulsion. We forged tools from hardened metal alloys, bashing them into shape with immense force. Our most advanced power source involved steam turning turbines. We communicated via modulated radio waves, a crude shouting into the dark that any species with a basic tachyon scanner could overhear. We were, in the elegant and dismissive term of the Concord, primitives. They gave us a patronizing label, the prodigals. A species with potential, lost in its own turbulent adolescence. They offered us a place in their grand symphony, but only if we silenced our discordant notes and learned to play theirs. We were assigned a mentor species, the Cthar, a race of elegant reptilian bipeds whose technology was based on crystalline resonance and gravitic manipulation. They were patient, they were condescending, and they found our primitive solutions to be utterly, hilariously quaint. This is the story of how their laughter died in their throats. This is the story of how a symphony of order was saved by a single beautiful and devastating chord of chaos. Rising conflict. The Cthar observation post in the Sol system was a place of serene beauty and profound boredom for its crew. It hung in the high orbit of Jupiter, a delicate sculpture of silver and glowing blue crystal, its lines flowing like frozen liquid. Inside, the air hummed with a soft, resonant frequency that promoted calm and focus. Senior observer Clarn watched the data feeds from Earth with a mixture of professional duty and personal dismay. On his main viewer, a feed showed a human orbital launch. A massive white cylindrical structure, shuddering violently as immense columns of fire and smoke erupted from its base, fighting gravity with what seemed like pure brute force rage. By the first song, Clarn sighed, his scales rippling in a gesture of distaste. They are still using chemical combustion. The waste mass, the inefficiency, it is physically painful to observe. His junior, a younger Cthar named Tvel, chirped with amusement. They call it a controlled explosion. I find it fascinatingly direct. They wish to go up, so they point a continuous fire in the opposite direction. Direct is a kind word for it, Tvel. It is barbaric. We offered them the schematics for a simple gravitic lifter. A child could assemble one. They looked at it, praised its elegance, and then filed it away in a database they call theoretical physics. They said their infrastructure wasn't compatible. Clarn made a soft clicking sound, the Cthar equivalent of a derisive snort. They are stubborn, senior observer, Tvel said. They have a peculiar attachment to their own aesthetic. Did you see the report on their digital networks? They still use systems with moving physical parts to store data. They call them hard drives. They fear a phenomenon they've named bit rot. It's adorable. Clarn called up another report. And their material science. They have mastered the creation of a substance called spring steel. They take their primitive iron, alloy it, and shape it so that it wants to return to its original form. They use it in everything from their writing implements to their vehicle suspensions. It is a technology we abandoned before we discovered fusion. This was the prevailing view of humanity. We were a species of clever savages, good at making a virtue out of necessity, but hopelessly out of our depth. Our greatest achievements, the International Space Station, our fledgling Martian outposts, were seen by the Concord as the equivalent of a child stacking mud bricks. Impressive for the child, but not something you would build a cathedral with. This condescending peace was shattered by the devourer swarm. It was a scourge the Concord had fought for centuries. A biomechanical horror, a hive mind of chitinous, insectoid ships that consumed worlds not for resources, but for raw mass and energy, breaking down planets to fuel their endless expansion. They were the anti-symphony, a static that erased songs. Their technology was not based on physics as the Concord understood it, It was a form of directed entropy. Their shields dissipated coherent energy. Their weapons unraveled molecular bonds. They didn't shoot lasers. They shot beams of decay. The Concorde's fleets, with their elegant gravity whips and crystalline lances, found their weapons becoming less effective with each engagement. The swarm adapted, learned, and dissipated their precise, ordered energy. A Concorde battleship would fire a lance of pure plasma, only to see it fizzle into harmless heat before it struck the swarm's organic armor. The swarm's own weapons, beams of rust-brown energy, would strike a Concorde vessel and reduce its shimmering hull to brittle oxidized dust in seconds. The war was going badly. And the front was getting closer. A swarm tendril, bypassing a major Concorde defensive line, emerged from a jump point alarmingly close to the Cthar core world of Silessa. The Cthar home fleet moved to intercept. The battle was a disaster. The elegant, song-based attack patterns of the Cthar were useless. Their ships were picked apart, their energy signatures tracked and neutralized by the swarm's adaptive systems. The home fleet was routed. In a moment of sheer, unadulterated panic, the Cthar High Command did something they would never have considered in 1,000 years. They sent a desperate, Priority 1 communique to their wayward, primitive wards. To Earth. The message was simple. The swarm vanguard would be in orbit around Silessa in 72 hours. The planet would be consumed. The Cthar had no defenses left that could stop it. As a signatory of the Concorde Mutual Defense Accord, they were requesting any and all assistance Earth could provide. On the Cthar observation post, Clarn received the directive with a sense of utter despair. They want us to ask the primitives? What can they do? Throw rocks at them. Tvel, for once, had no cheerful chirp. The directive says, all possible assistance, senior observer. Perhaps they have some military asset we have not catalogued? A energy weapon we overlooked. Their most powerful energy weapon is a nuclear fission device, Tvel, Clarn said, his voice hollow. It creates an uncontrolled fusion reaction as a byproduct of its detonation. It is a weapon of terror, of indiscriminate slaughter. The Concorde banned their use millennia ago. And even if we allowed it, the swarm's point defense systems would detonate the warhead 1,000 kilometers from any viable target. No. We are asking the child to save the master. The symphony is ending. On Earth, the message was received not with panic, but with a grim, focused silence. The world's leaders, for the first time in history, did not bicker. They did not debate. They convened the United Earth Defense Council, and they listened to the data packets from the Cthar. They saw the recordings of the battles. They saw the elegant Concorde ships turning to dust. And in a secure hangar at the Nevada Test and Training Range, a man named Colonel Eva Rostova looked at the holographic schematics of the swarm and smiled a thin, cold smile. She was the head of Project Chimera, a black-budget program so secret that not even the Cthar knew it existed. It was a program born from a simple human observation. The mentor species were brilliant, but they thought in a straight line. Humanity thought in zigzags. She opened a channel to the council. We can't fight them, she said, her voice calm and steady. Their technology is designed to defeat everything the Concorde has. It's designed to defeat order, precision, and focused energy. There was a long silence on the line. Then, the voice of the Secretary General, heavy with defeat. Then we are powerless, Colonel. Rostova's smile widened. No, sir. We're not. We can't fight them. But we can break them. And we have the perfect tools for the job. Human response. The human fleet that translated into the Silessa system 6 hours before the swarm's estimated arrival was not what the Cthar expected. It was not a fleet of warships. It was a ragtag collection of industrial vessels, mining barges, and heavily modified civilian freighters. They were blocky, ugly, and utilitarian, their hulls scarred by atmospheric reentry and pitted by micrometeorites. They looked like a floating junkyard. From the bridge of the Cthar command ship, the resplendent Harmony, Admiral Cthar himself watched the sensor feed with disbelief. This is their assistance? Those things? They look like they are held together by that primitive adhesive they use. Duct tape, I believe it is called. Clarn, who had been assigned to the Admiral's staff as a human liaison, felt a flush of embarrassment. Their communique identifies the lead vessel as the UEF Daedalus. It appears to be a repurposed heavy-lift cargo hauler. The Daedalus was a monstrosity. It had the rough, cylindrical shape of a terrestrial skyscraper. Laid on its side, with massive boxy thrusters bolted haphazardly to its stern. There were no elegant lines, no crystalline arrays. Just thick, durasteel plating, visible weld lines, and a forest of sensor dishes and communication antennae that looked like they had been added as an afterthought. A channel opened. The face that appeared on the viewer was Colonel Eva Rostova. Her hair was cropped short, her features sharp and devoid of the serene calm the Kthar associated with command. She looked tired, focused, and utterly uncompromising. "Admiral," she said, her voice crisp. "Colonel Eva Rostova, United Earth Forces. We're here to implement Operation Sledgehammer. We request you reposition your remaining fleet assets to these coordinates." A data stream accompanied her words, showing a position well away from the planet and far from the predicted swarm entry point.
Admiral Kathares Crestflared.
"Reposition? Colonel, my ships, while ineffective, are the only shield Silessa has. We will make a stand in high orbit, as honor dictates." Rostova didn't even blink. "With all due respect, Admiral, your honor is about to get your world eaten. Your ships are sensor beacons. Their energy signatures are what the swarm targets. You're not a shield, you're a buffet. Pull back. Let us work." The sheer audacity of the command left the bridge in stunned silence. A primitive was giving orders to a Concord admiral. Klarn expected the admiral to sever the link. Instead, he stared at Rostova's image, seeing something in her eyes that he had never seen in a Concord officer. Not serenity, not acceptance of fate, but a raw, feral will to impose a different fate. "Explain your plan, Colonel," the admiral said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Our technology is incompatible with the swarm's defenses," Rostova said, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. "They're designed to defeat your sophisticated systems. They won't know what to do with ours. Now, please, pull your fleet back. You're in our splash zone." Defeated, humiliated, but with no other option, the admiral gave the order. The handful of surviving Kthar warships, their hulls still scarred from the previous battle, powered down their primary systems and moved to the designated fallback position, a silent, shameful audience to what they were sure would be a grotesque spectacle of primitive suicide. The Kthar watched as the human fleet began its work. It was not a military deployment. It was an industrial operation. Massive mining barges, the Midas and the King Solomon, moved towards the asteroid belt on the system's edge. They didn't use elegant tractor beams. They fired massive physical harpoons into the asteroids, then activated powerful winches to reel them in. Once secured, enormous plasma torches, crude, thermal cutting tools the Kthar used only for artisanal metalwork, began slicing the asteroids into specific, jagged shapes. Other ships began deploying what the humans called the web. It was a series of millions of small canister-sized objects ejected into a wide, chaotic sphere around Silessa. Each canister was a simple, dumb object, a metal shell containing a compressed, volatile chemical gas and a basic proximity sensor. "This is their grand strategy," Admiral Kthar whispered, aghast. "Space debris and chemical explosives? They are trying to build a wall. The swarm will simply go through it." Klarn, however, was watching more closely. He saw the pattern. It wasn't a wall. It was a cloud. A chaotic, three-dimensional minefield with no predictable safe path. The shaped asteroids were being positioned not as barriers, but as anvils. The entire setup was brutal, simple, and utterly devoid of the elegant tactical doctrines the Concord employed. Then the swarm arrived. It was a tear in the fabric of space itself, vomiting forth a wave of biological nightmares. The swarm ships were angular, wasp-like things the size of mountains there. Hulls a pulsating chitinous black that seemed to drink the light from the stars. A rust-colored energy, the color of decay, bled from their weapon ports. They moved as one, a single, horrifying consciousness. They immediately detected the Kthar fleet, their systems latching onto the faint, but still present, residual energy signatures. A portion of the swarm shifted course, intent on finishing the job. And then they hit the edge of the web. The first swarm scout ship triggered a proximity mine. There was no laser, no plasma bolt. The canister simply detonated, releasing a hyper-expanding cloud of shrapnel and a concussive wave of force. The shrapnel was not energized, it was just jagged metal. The swarm's point defense, designed to neutralize coherent energy, did nothing. The shrapnel peppered the chitinous hull, causing minimal damage, but confusing the hive mind. This was not an attack it recognized. More ships entered the cloud. The space around Silessa lit up with thousands of small, dumb, chemical explosions. It was like flying into a hailstorm of grenades. The swarm's adaptive systems were baffled. There was no energy signature to dissipate, no ordered pattern to predict. It was chaos. The lead swarm battleship, a Leviathan that had destroyed 3 Cthar cruisers by itself, plowed through the minefield, the small explosions barely scratching its thick armor. It focused its main weapon, a massive decay lance, on the human command ship, the Deadless. "Colonel, the lead swarm vessel is targeting us." "Energy spike," a technician on the Deadless yelled. Rostova, strapped into her command chair, didn't flinch. "All right, people. Let's introduce them to the concept of percussive maintenance. Mining control, you are a go for Anvil." From behind a strategically positioned asteroid, the mining barge King Solomon fired its harpoons. But this time, they weren't aimed at an asteroid. They were aimed at the swarm battleship. The massive, tungsten-tipped harp, Uans, propelled by crude but immensely powerful chemical rockets, slammed into the biological warship. They didn't explode. They just punched deep into its flesh, anchoring fast. Then the King Solomon fired its main thrusters, a colossal dirty plume of fire and radiation, and went to full reverse. The cables, woven from carbon nanotubes, snapped taut. On the Cthar bridge, the admiral and his crew watched, utterly dumbfounded. They are towing it?" Tvel whispered, his scales pale. The swarm battleship, caught completely by surprise, was jerked off its course. Its biology, never designed to withstand this kind of brute physical force, groaned under the strain. Chitinous plates buckled. The decay lance fired wildly, its beam slicing harmlessly through empty space. "Now hammer," Rostova said, her voice cold. From the opposite direction, the Midas launched its payload. It wasn't a harpoon. It was one of the asteroids it had been shaping, a lump of nickel iron the size of a small city, now crudely engineered into a giant, asymmetrical spearhead. Strapped to its back were the engines from 12 decommissioned intercontinental ballistic missiles. The rock, designated Hammer 1, accelerated. It was slow. It was clumsy. It was the absolute antithesis of a Concorde kinetic kill projectile. It was just a big rock, being pushed very, very hard. The swarm battleship, struggling against the tow cables of the King Solomon, couldn't maneuver. Its point defense lasers flickered, trying to target the incoming asteroid. They vaporized the surface, turning it into a stream of superheated plasma, but the sheer mass of the rock kept coming. It was too big, too dumb, too simple to stop. The impact was not a clean penetration. It was a cataclysm. The asteroid shattered against the swarm ship's hull, transferring its entire immense kinetic energy in a single universe-shattering moment. The biological warship didn't just break, it disintegrated. It was pulped, reduced to an expanding cloud of organic slurry and fragmented chitin. The shockwave rippled out, stunning the nearby swarm vessels. On the bridge of the resplendent Harmony, there was a silence so profound it felt like a physical entity. The Cthar, who waged war with beams that unraveled matter, had just witnessed a warship being killed by a rock. A big, fast, deliberately aimed rock. Admiral Cthar slowly turned to Klarn, his eyes wide. They used a mining barge and an asteroid as a club. Klarn could only nod, his mind reeling. He was witnessing the application of the most primitive form of physics, force equals mass times acceleration, on a stellar scale. It was so simple, so brutally direct, that the hyper-advanced swarm had no counter for it. They were prepared for a duel. They were not prepared for a bar fight. Climax. The battle, or rather, the systematic dismantling, continued. The human fleet operated not like a military formation, but like a swarm of industrial insects, each ship performing a specific brutal task. They deployed rattlers, small heavily armored drones with no weapons, just a powerful high-frequency vibrational emitter. They would latch onto a swarm ship and simply vibrate, resonating with the chitinous hull until it fatigued and fractured from the inside out. The Cthar had sonic technology, of course, but they used it for healing and communication. The humans had weaponized the concept of noise. They used spark plugs, modified fusion reactors deliberately overloaded and jettisoned into the heart of swarm formations. When the swarm's decay beams hit them, trying to neutralize their energy, it only accelerated the overload, creating a short-lived, but terrifyingly powerful, electromagnetic pulse that scrambled the swarm's hive-mind connections, causing smaller ships to drift aimlessly, colliding with one another. The humans fought with chaos. They fought with friction. They fought with brute force and unapologetic cunning. They used the swarm's own advanced, ordered nature against it. The swarm was a perfect, sophisticated lock. Humanity was a sledgehammer. The climax came when the swarm hive queen, the central consciousness of the entire tendril, revealed itself. It was a vessel the size of a small moon, a pulsating cancerous heart at the center of the fleet. It was generating a powerful entropy field that was slowly but surely degrading the human ships, despite their low-tech nature. The Daedalus was reporting system failures, metal fatigue, and circuitry burning out just from being in its proximity. "We can't get close," Rostova's second-in-command reported, his voice strained. "The field is too strong. Our systems are failing. We can't throw a rock at this one, Colonel. It'll decay before it gets there." Rostova watched the monstrous vessel on the main viewer. It was the embodiment of everything the Concorde feared. A problem that could not be outthought with superior science. "Then we don't throw a rock," she said softly. "We give it a seed." She gave the order for the final phase, Operation Golem. A single, small ship detached from the Daedalus. It was an old pre-Concorde design, a deep space probe called a Voyager class. It was a simple triangular craft, powered by a radioisotope thermoelectric generator, a primitive power source that produced energy from the natural decay of a radioactive pellet. It was so low energy, so simple, that the swarm's entropy field barely registered it. Inside its shielded payload bay was not a weapon. It was a data chip. On that chip was a complete, uncompressed copy of the entire Earth's global internet. Every meme, every cat video, every social media post, every academic paper, every piece of music, every line of code, every scrap of data from the sum total of human knowledge and insanity. It was the ultimate DDoS attack, packaged and delivered. The probe, designated Golem 1, flew straight towards the Hive Queen. The swarm's point. Defense ignored it. It was beneath notice. It was a primitive artifact, a piece of drifting space junk. It reached the Hive Queen's outer hull and using a simple shaped charge, another controlled explosion, it buried itself deep into the biological tissue. And then it began to broadcast. It used a simple radio transmitter, a technology the swarm had likely evolved beyond millions of years ago. It flooded the Hive Queen's neural network with a tsunami of pure, undiluted, chaotic, human consciousness. The Cthar sensors, monitoring the event, went wild. The Hive Queen's psionic signature, it's fluctuating. Tvel cried out. It's reading patterns that make no sense. Incoherent bursts of data. Music, visual media, text, it's all flooding the central ganglion at once. The Hive Queen, a mind accustomed to the single focused purpose of consumption, was suddenly filled with a billion screaming, laughing, singing, arguing, creating, destroying, loving, hating voices. It was experiencing the full, glorious, and terrifying spectrum of the human condition all at once. It saw videos of ballet. It read recipes for potato soup. It was bombarded with political arguments, philosophical debates, and pictures of people's lunches. It tried to process the concept of love, of faith, of art, of boredom. It tried to comprehend why a species would create something as beautiful as a symphony and then something as vile as a hateful manifesto. The swarm fleet, connected to the Queen, began to convulse. Ships stopped moving. Some turned their weapons on each other. Others began spinning in endless, pointless circles. The hive mind was short-circuiting. It was being driven insane. The entropy field flickered and died. "That's our cue," Rostova said. "All remaining vessels. Full broadside. Give them everything we've got. The old-fashioned way." What was left of the human fleet, the mining barges, the freighters, the tugs, opened fire. They didn't have energy weapons. They didn't attack its systems. We attacked its mind. We showed it the full, terrifying, beautiful, and illogical weight of the human soul. It couldn't handle it. The admiral slowly bowed his head, a profound gesture of respect and humility among the Cthar. We called you primitives. We laughed at your technology. We thought your attachment to combustion and kinetic force was a sign of backwardness. Rostova's smile returned, warmer this time. You weren't entirely wrong. Our tech is primitive. It's messy. It's loud. It's inefficient. But it's robust. It's flexible. And it's ours. You see, Admiral, you build perfect systems to solve defined problems. We build messy tools to survive an unpredictable universe. Your way is better for building a civilization. Our way is better for saving one. In that moment, the Kthar understood. They had spent millennia refining their symphony, polishing each note to perfection. But humanity had never been trying to play a symphony. They were a jazz band in a universe that had only known classical music. They improvised. They used discord. They took a simple 12-bar blues and turned it into a weapon that could shatter gods. The human fleet, battered but victorious, began the slow process of regrouping. They weren't celebrating. They were assessing damage, treating wounded, and figuring out how to get their broken primitive ships back home. They had done an impossible thing, and now they were just getting back to work. Ending. And for the first time, the galaxy looked upon humanity, not as prodigals or primitives, but as something new, something formidable, and something profoundly beautiful in its chaotic resilience. They saw the species that would stare into the face of an unstoppable galaxy-consuming horror and not pray for salvation, but pick up a rock, calculate the trajectory, and throw it. They had laughed at our primitive technology, our controlled explosions, our spring steel, our stubborn refusal to do things the right way. They had laughed until that same primitive technology, born from necessity, tempered in conflict, and wielded with an unbreakable will, did what all their flawless, perfect science could not. It won their war. And for the first time, the galaxy understood what it truly meant to be human. If this story moved you, subscribe for more human stories from the stars.